afternoon, I'm Christopher Olson. Today I'm going to be talking to you about exercise ball safety when working with an older adult client. This is John Olson. He'll be helping us with the demonstration today. The first thing that I want to talk about is actual exercise ball safety, placement of the exercise ball. Optimally, what you want to do is place the exercise ball in between two sturdy objects. So, for example, place it between two chairs, so that if the client begins to fall while he's on the exercise ball, he's able to catch himself to either side. In this case, what we're doing right now is I have a stable object to his left side, and while he's performing exercises, I'm going to be spotting him from the other side. And it's perfectly acceptable for you to spot the client from the side while kneeling on the floor. Now, an additional point to keep in mind when you're working with an older adult on a stability ball, in regards to positioning the exercise ball, the client's back should be to a wall, so that if they begin to fall backwards, the wall will basically stop them instead of having them fall all the way to the ground. Now, obviously, you don't want them to be all the way up against the wall, because then the stability ball will be more stable and the person won't get any balance benefit out of the exercise. Now, with an older adult, when they're actually sitting on the exercise ball, in terms of their body position, their knees should be at a greater than 90-degree angle. So this stability ball right here is actually too short for this client, because if he has his feet, go ahead and put your feet flat on the floor like as if you were sitting on a chair.
Oh, okay.
See, his knees are at much less than a 90-degree angle. They're very sharp. And because of that, when the client stands up from the ball or sits down onto the ball, it puts a great amount of stress on his knees. So for this client, we would actually want a much taller stability ball. This one would be more suitable for a much shorter client. Another point to keep in mind when positioning your client on the stability ball is that their feet should be flat on the floor. This allows them greater stability while they're on the ball. If you had a really advanced client, someone that was really good at balancing, you would actually be able to have them take their feet off the ball and they'd be able to balance that way. But for most people, you want the feet to be flat on the floor. One more thing to keep in mind in regards to positioning is that the client's back should not be hyperextended. Their back should be in as much of a neutral position as possible. Nice, straight vertebral column. So in order to ensure that this happens, try and make it so that the client's butt is directly below their shoulders. And it's always okay to, well, as long as your client is okay with you touching them, you can go ahead and put your hand on the small of their back to make sure that their back isn't hyperextended. Because if their back is hyperextended, it puts a tremendous amount of stress on the back. Not the biggest deal for a younger, healthier client, but for an older adult, especially one that has osteoporosis or existing back problems, you definitely want their back to be in a nice neutral position. So keep their butt directly underneath their shoulders. Now, the reason why performing exercises on a stability ball is so important for older adults is because as we age, the ability to balance oneself starts to just degrade naturally. So performing exercises on an exercise ball challenges a person's balance ability and really forces them to focus on maintaining their stability. Now, when we're working with dumbbell exercises while on a stability ball, there are two ways that we can go. We can perform a bilateral movement, okay, where both weights are being moved at once. Or we can do a unilateral movement, which is where you're just moving one of the weights at a time. Now, in terms of trying to challenge a person's stability, it's actually much better to do the unilateral movement because it actually takes the person's center of gravity further outside of the base of support. Whereas when you're doing the exercise with both sides at once, the center of gravity stays where it is, and you're not challenging the balance as much. Now, one exception to this is if you are performing an exercise in the sagittal plane, like doing a frontal raise. If you do that with both weights at once, it actually brings the center of gravity outside of the base of support in that direction. But if you're doing exercises in the frontal plane, it's much better to just do one side at a time, because then it really challenges your sense of balance. Now, regarding working with older adults on a stability ball, there are actually a couple of exercises that would be contraindicated, exercises that you should not do with an older adult. One of these exercises would actually be crunches on a stability ball. Go ahead and demonstrate crunches for us. Now, if your client has a perfectly healthy back, doesn't have any sort of history of back issues, and also does not have osteoporosis or even osteopenia, this exercise would be just fine. However, if your client does have any of those issues, and especially if they are a much older and more frail older adult, this would be a contraindicated exercise because it places an enormous amount of stress on the vertebrae in the upper back and also in the neck. Just an enormous amount of shear force, because there's nothing supporting that part of the body during the exercise. So this would be contraindicated, a contraindicated exercise for anybody that has poor bone mineral density or just has any sort of history of back problems. Another notable exercise that would be contraindicated for older adults, especially those that have back problems or who have low bone mineral density, or even that just have arthritis, is a plank on a stability ball. Specifically, I'm referring to a plank where the ankles are up and supported on the stability ball itself, and where the hands are on the ground and the back is being held straight. Now, the reason why this would be a contraindicated exercise for older adults, particularly those that have the problems that I mentioned, is because, once again, it places an enormous amount of shear force on the lower back, and also it places an enormous amount of stress on the wrists. So anybody that has arthritis of the wrists is going to have a hard time with this exercise and may actually experience some ill effects from it.